Mayor Rose of Irwin, the late Mayor Rose, served 28 years as Irwin's mayor. 28 years. To put that in perspective, I was born in 1986. That was 29 years ago. I turned 30 in September. So 28 years, Mr. Daniel T. Rose served as the mayor of Irwin. 9 years, Mayor Rose served as council president. And prior to that, Dan Rose served 16 years as a member of the borough council. So we're looking at 30, 40, about 50 years, over 50 years of service to the borough of Irwin. Mayor Rose was a member of the United States military, and he served in a prison camp, actually. And it was an interesting story. There's another gentleman who lives in the same area. For those of you who are not familiar with the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh, and yes, I know it's in Westmoreland County, but it's still pretty much a suburb. You've got three municipalities in the Norwin School District. You have Irwin, North Irwin, and North Huntington. There was a gentleman named Hugh Bridge, and I believe he was from North Irwin originally. He moved to North Huntington. Hugh Bridge was a member of the United States military. Really a cool old guy. He was shot down in the military. He was in the, I guess what would eventually become the Air Force, but he was shot down. He was a gunner. He was taken and put into a prison camp. Mayor Rose grew up in Irwin. He grew up in Irwin. Hugh Bridge grew up in North Irwin. The two met each other for the first time overseas in Germany in a prison camp.
That's horrible.
That's how they met each other. I think that's fascinating. These people lived literally maybe a mile or two apart. Never met each other until they were taken prisoner
In Germany.
in Germany
That's nuts.
after being shot down. I just think that's such a fascinating story. And what an awesome man. So earlier today, at 8 a.m., Irwin held a mass for Mayor Rose at the Immaculate Conception Cemetery. And they dedicated a bench to him at their veteran memorial at that cemetery. So that's a really cool way to show your respect to somebody who served in our military. That's cool. Kudos to Irwin. There's a lot of other cool things going on. Let's see. I pulled this up here. We have holiday events. This is from WTAE. There was a parade in Canonsburg at 9 a.m. Right after this show, at 11 a.m., Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Museum. They are holding a free event from 11 to 4 to commemorate fallen service members, and I believe they're also going to be commemorating some members from our current wars in the war against terror. The Heinz History Center is holding a flag ceremony there. Lawrenceville right now, if you head over to Lawrenceville, if you're listening to this show in the car, head over to Lawrenceville. They are having a parade that is going on right now. It started at 10 a.m. It is going into the Allegheny Cemetery, which is, I believe, more than just a cemetery. It's also somewhat of not a museum, but it's like a historical place. You can go and see fantastic headstones and things like that at Lawrenceville, at the Allegheny Cemetery. A lot of different places. Kennywood, the zoo, other people are offering discounts to military members. So lots of great stuff to do. Same with the Carnegie Science Center, giving 50% off general admission to people. And they also have down there the submarine, the Requiem submarine. And it's kind of interesting. I was walking today, a funny story, at Point Park, right downtown, and they have the old blockhouse. Have you ever been to the blockhouse?
No.
No, there's an old blockhouse. It's free admission, and it's the oldest building in Pittsburgh. It was built in the 1700s, and the blockhouse was built as almost like what a turret would be today. So you have Fort Pitt, and they built later, after Fort Pitt had been established, these little blockhouses as kind of an introductory, like a first line of defense.
Yeah.
And I was actually at Fort Necessity the other day, and they had reenactors there, and the gentleman there, the ranger, said that a fort is like an onion, and you have different layers. So that was a layer that they built. And this blockhouse was built in the 1700s. It never actually saw battle. It was built kind of after the fact, but it kind of goes to show you what an important place Pittsburgh was in the early colonial era. Because Pittsburgh was actually, if you think about it, back in those days, the rivers were like highways today.
Yeah.
So if you controlled the rivers, you controlled the travel throughout the region. And Pittsburgh at the time was actually part of Virginia. It was a Virginia territory. And the French held Fort Duquesne. It turned over. And even though that wasn't America, it still kind of shaped the way that our country is today. And it's just interesting to know what an important military area this was. I mean, George Washington had his first defeat in Fort Necessity, for example. So he's been all through this area, and it was interesting. So if you get a chance, check out the blockhouse. It's just a really fascinating piece of history. It actually housed several families as well, believe it or not. The blockhouse at the time, luckily it wasn't destroyed, but that area that is now Point Park was at one time the poorest area in Pittsburgh. It was a housing area. It was basically the slums in Pittsburgh, and I believe there were a few families at one point who were living out of that blockhouse, which is like a little bit bigger than this studio. So really cramped quarters, really just terrible living conditions. But it was a fascinating trip if you get to go see it. But it's just interesting. Go take a look around. There's some war memorials out on the north side. Lots of interesting things to check. I did ask you guys on Facebook what you were doing for Memorial Day. And we had Pat said he's gardening and planting flowers on the graves of deceased relatives. And then he may visit some other relatives, so that's very nice. My friend Chris, he responded that he is going to the VFW in Sharpsburg. His girlfriend is singing there, and then she is going to be singing at some cemeteries. Michelle says she's going to the Memorial Day Parade. And Dylan says he's listening to Will Smith rap about summertime from the 90s. So, but to my point, those picnics, we have the freedom to do that thanks to those veterans. So I think maybe indulging a little is in some ways a thank you to them. And you always hear these people, and this is one of the comments that always kind of irks me. People on Facebook they literally tell me that we need reminded about the service. I agree it's important to remember these people, but really, do we need reminded in this country? Go to the Penguin game tonight. You'll hear the Star-Spangled Banner. Go to the Pirates game tonight. You'll hear the Star-Spangled Banner and possibly God Bless America. It's everywhere. It's in your face everywhere. In fact, we're bludgeoned with this stuff so much to the fact that it almost loses some of its value because we're just beaten over the head with it. And again, it's important to do, but when it's so force-fed, when you're spoon-fed this stuff nonstop all the time, I feel like you go to some of these games and people are just going through the motions, and that's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
That's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Interesting story about Point Park, real quick. I was walking through Point Park today, and someone asked me if they could borrow a lighter while I'm wearing a shirt that says I'm dying to be smoke-free, literally. Your weird news in 30 seconds on the River's Edge.